Fucking hell, I miss Norway. The fjords, the mountains, the forests, the people, and of course the country's beautiful history. What I won't lament for is how expensive everything is over there. I recall paying 650 kroners for a round. That's basically £50 in exchange for 3.5 fucking pints. Now, I'm not saying Blighty is cheap, but for the same amount of bread and honey, I could easily attain enough fuel for fun, if you catch my drift, that would have me wake up the next day in the middle of a roundabout wearing nothing but glow sticks and a glorious amount of stripper glitter. Anyway, former UFC middleweight fighter Elwood Dalton finds employment working security at a Floridian roadhouse. However, the titular establishment is constantly attracting the most unsavoury of characters, so Dalton is tasked with diluting the degenerate behaviour by ways of beatdowns reminiscent of the ones I dish out to my hepatologist if I think they're about to suggest I cut down. For those unaware, Roadhouse is a reimagining of the 1989 classic, which for the sake of tokenism I decided to watch for the first time recently, an undertaking that turned out to be completely pointless. Sure, they share a title, basic premise, tone and snippets of dialogue, but you don't need to punish yourself by viewing the original to appreciate the rendition outside of Easter eggs hollower than Jake Paul's cranium. It's practically a given that anyone who decides to stream Roadhouse will do so hoping they'll witness a tasteful amount of fight porn, and I'm happy to report that the itch gets seen to by vigorous nails. The action comes frequently enough over the 121-minute runtime for you not to get bored with the frankly predictable narrative. It's well choreographed too, overly so sometimes, but that's to be expected from a movie of this caliber. Also, shout out to the sound engineer for perfectly emulating the audio achieved by tenderizing the human anatomy with various body parts and whatever else is available within the confines of its rated 15 classification certificate. Speaking of sound, due to the very nature of the Roadhouse bar itself, there were an assortment of bands that were given the opportunity to showcase their material, which is a good idea. However, in this case, the vast majority of the music on display was objectively shit. Visually speaking, in terms of location, the movie is beautiful because it's set in the attractive parts of Florida, but the CGI is primarily ugly, and I truly believe that if Roadhouse was released in the cinema, those not so special effects would have been more exposed than my capability to come up with a funny ending to this paragraph on the fly. Jake Gyllenhaal is a consummate professional when it comes to being the protagonist of action films, so it didn't surprise me at all that he played the part of Elwood Dalton efficiently whilst also looking shredded as fuck. A pleasant surprise came in the form of Conor McGregor's acting debut. Yes, I'm well aware that he was basically playing a parody of himself, but that doesn't mean a good performance was guaranteed. Director Doug Liman clearly anticipated that McGregor was going to have extremely limited range, so he created a lane fabricated from Conor's existing characteristics, and all the Notorious had to do was not stray off course. Mercifully, Mystic Mac abided to the direction and delivered a genuinely decent portrayal as the antagonist. His dialogue deliverance was satisfactory considering the lack of experience. He appeared to look comfortable in combat sequences that are obviously way more architectural than the shit that takes place in the Octagon, not to mention despite being a debutant to the film industry, he still emitted a potent screen presence. So should McGregor abandon all of his current endeavours and focus exclusively on an acting career? That would depend purely on how willing movie makers are to forge a character around Conor's aforementioned range. With that said though, his name is a big draw even if it's a venture outside of the UFC. Take Roadhouse for example. As we know, it serves as the inaugural meeting between McGregor and a film reel, yet still within the first 2 weeks of release, Amazon reported that this feature has been streamed over 50 million times, beating any original movie they've ever produced for Prime Video. Of course, this success can't be solely attributed to Conor, but his involvement in the project is undeniably responsible for a great portion of that statistic, much like the bulk of this YouTube channel's viewership comes courtesy of a crippling volume of narcissism and my keyboard's refresh button. Roadhouse has received a lofty amount of negative remarks by critics and fans of the original alike. Sure, it may contain the odd flaw here and there, but I believe it is predominantly superior to its predecessor. Inferiority comes in the form of the music, the exclusion of Sam Elliott, and unlike the 1989 version, for some ungodly reason opted to disinvolve a plethora of naked boobs, but despite said lack of braless Humpty Dumplings on show, I really fucking enjoyed Roadhouse. Why? Because it arouses the part of my brain that likes barely hinged idiotic, but before interpreting that as a recommendation, I should forewarn you I'm on about the same section of my cerebrum that gets stimulated by the thought of mosh pits, drink quad biking, as well as substituting my cock sleeve for deli meat.